Okay, we'll start with this. Well, as you all may know, unified featherweight champion Mandy Serrano was in action this weekend in the lightweight division against Miriam Gutierrez, what is now a common opponent between her and Katie Taylor. Having racked up another professional victory, Amanda Serrano says that's the mega fight that will blow off the roof. The selection of Gutierrez was by design, as the 38-year-old Spaniard had only lost to Taylor prior to Saturday evening. With that fight out of the way, the focus is on finalizing what is already being hailed as the biggest fight in women's boxing history. We are both pound-for-pound top 3. Some people have me at 2 or 3, noted Serrano, who has won 28 consecutive fights dating back to 2012. It doesn't matter how you look at it, 2 pound-for-pound girls going at it, you have an undisputed champion and a 7-division world champion going after each other. That's the mega fight that will blow off the roof. We're looking at Madison Square Garden, the main room. It's going to be an amazing fight.
They're talking about the big room, not the Hulu Theater.
Amanda Serrano could not have better summarized the aftermath of her latest victory. It's Katie Taylor time, baby. Serrano told BoxingScene.com and other reporters as she walked off stage following the post-fight press conference to discuss her 10-round virtual shutout of Miriam Gutierrez. And, more often than not, this conversation is dominated by things that have happened.
Feelings of resentment.
Politics and purse demands, waffling.
He said, she said.
More often than not, when this subject is broached, the actual boxing, the boxing as it were.
Usually it's not the focal point of the conversation.
Though here today it is. Both Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano, they're on the same schedule. They've been active at or around the same time this year, and this is supposed to be the very next fight going into the year of 2022, several months into it.
Listen, I don't care about your tribalism.
You and your loyalty and your tribalism is your own business, not mine. I'm trying to edge a fight and understand what it is I might see when both Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano share the ring.
I don't care which one of these girls you've got more in common with, you understand?
Once again, who you're rooting for and why is your own business, not mine. Thus, this conversation is not motivated.
I don't care if you're rooting for Katie because she's Irish.
I don't give a rat's furry fucking ass if you're rooting for Amanda because she's Puerto Rican. That means absolutely nothing to me. Might mean the world to you.
But I'm not going to sit here and edge a fight based on which flag the fighter flies.
The fuck does that have to do with anything?
This is about boxing, not banners.
Fights, not flags. This is not about being patriotic. This is about pugilism.
Prize fighting.
Not pride fighting. This weekend, Amanda Serrano was in action against Miriam Gutierrez, a common opponent between her and Katie Taylor. And any seasoned fight fan, any boxing historian, anyone familiar with this sport will know that triangle theories, they don't work. Ali versus Frazier, Frazier versus Foreman, and Foreman versus Ali are a prime example of that. Triangle theories don't work.
Styles make fights.
And Katie Taylor, what Amanda Serrano will be facing is a naturally bigger woman who's also a harder target than anyone she's fought before. A fighter with better feet, better movement, better angles, better in-and-out game speed, and combinations ring savvy than any other girl she's fought in the past.
Comparatively, I think Katie's had more preparation for Amanda than Amanda's had for Katie.
Based on who they fought, what you can find on their respective resumes, their track records, Katie Taylor's faced big punchers before, volume punchers that have great engines.
Delphine Persoon, Christina Leonardo.
Those are 2 very big punches that Katie Taylor's faced before. Delphine Persoon, 2 times. Delphine Persoon, who's got punching power, a great engine, and a whole lot of durability, a whole lot of experience. Christina Leonardo, a knockout puncher with a great set of legs, great feet.
Explosive power and athleticism.
When you think about Amanda Serrano and what her standout qualities are, she's a very good textbook boxer who fights out of the southpaw stance, usually applies a lot of pressure on her opponents, throws very good straight punches and body shots. Katie Taylor's actually fought hard-punching southpaws before, at least one.
In Ms. Great Britain.
Natasha Jonas, earlier this year, who we all know is a very strong puncher.
She is.
Good pedigree.
She's a southpaw. Katie Taylor has fought more big punchers than Amanda Serrano.
More volume punchers than Amanda Serrano, more often than Amanda Serrano. Now, you tell me, how many girls like Katie has Amanda fought?
They don't have to be Katie's spitting image.
But how many girls that possess the same characteristics as Katie Taylor, at least some of them, how many of these girls has Amanda Serrano come up against? The biggest and best wins on her resume: Heather Hardy.
She's nothing like Katie.
Maria Maderna.
She's nothing like Katie.
Fatuma Zarica.
She's nothing like Katie.
Daniela Bermudez.
She's nothing like Katie.
Jamie Mercado is nothing like Katie Taylor. You got to tick off the boxes. What does Katie Taylor bring to the table, and how many times has Amanda Serrano come up against that before? Because in Katie, you've got a harder target than anybody you've fought before, with better feet than anyone you've fought before, more speed and combinations, a better pedigree, amateur pedigree than anybody you've fought before professionally.
She's more decorated than anybody Amanda fought before.
This is what I'm thinking about ahead of this fight. How many times has Amanda Serrano come up against a girl that possesses some of the same qualities as a Katie Taylor? Because Katie Taylor's used to being both the aggressor and the defender, whereas Amanda's more accustomed to having it all her way in the ring.
Katie's faced southpaws before.
In Nina Menke, Natasha Jonas, she's fought volume punchers before. In Delphine Pursoon, in Jessica McCaskill.
She fought an explosive puncher in Christina Leonardo, too.
On Saturday night, Amanda Serrano was in there against Miriam Gutierrez, and Amanda couldn't miss Miriam Gutierrez. She got her in trouble very early in the fight, similar to how she got Heather Hardy in trouble very early in the fight. But she couldn't finish Heather at 126 pounds, or Demi Mercado at 126 pounds, or Miriam Gutierrez at 135 pounds.
She dominated all of them, but she couldn't knock them out.
So from where I'm sitting, the question is, if you can't take out a more flat-footed and stationary target than Katie Taylor, how are you going to take out Katie Taylor?
Your power wasn't enough to stop targets that don't move that much.
Could a moving target neutralize your power? I don't doubt that Amanda Serrano has very respectable power at lightweight. I just wonder how she's going to deal with an opponent that isn't there to be hit.
Jamie Mercado tried to be a moving target.
Super bantamweight WBC champion Jamie Mercado, who traveled up to featherweight for that fight with Amanda. Amanda's corner expressed their discontent that Jamie Mercado wasn't going toe-to-toe with Amanda, that Jamie Mercado was moving around using the ring.
And Amanda couldn't finish her.
This ain't a super bantamweight that Amanda's going to be fighting at featherweight, and this isn't a featherweight contest. This is a lightweight contest.
These are just some things to think about ahead of this fight.
In other news, I'm sure most of you have heard by now, Errol Spence Jr. versus Yordenis Ugas is reportedly being finalized for a 3-belt WBA, WBC, and IBF welterweight title unification fight to take place in March or April. By March or April, it will have been over a year's time, well over a year, since Errol Spence Jr. had a fight. The Danny Garcia fight of late last year in December. It's been a year, actually, since that fight. It's going to be a year and some months by the time March and April get here. And as you can imagine, Errol Spence Jr.'s fans are quite happy to hear that he's going to get to participate in a unification match that doesn't involve Terrence Crawford. We've talked about that here on the channel. This kind of blissful ignorance. I've seen it before, and I've seen it backfire.
Putting off one fight for another.
Wasn't even that long ago. We've been here before, ladies and gentlemen, to where a guy just keeps putting off a fight, an important fight, what is arguably the most important fight of that fighter's career, for alternatives.
Some of Spence's fans view this as a tune-up fight.
They think he needs one ahead of what could be a Terrence Crawford showdown later on next year. That is the lens they're viewing this situation through, whereas the lens I view the situation through is a lens to where tomorrow isn't promised, and in the sport of boxing, anything can happen. Oh, it seems very logical for Errol Spence Jr. to have at least one fight before he faces Terrence Crawford. But if he has that one fight, who says he makes it to Terrence Crawford? Is Yordenis Ugas really the kind of guy you get off the couch to fight? Is that what he is? Is he a tune-up kind of guy? Tune-up kind of opponent? For a fighter who will not have fought in well over a year, is coming off an eye injury that in some instances has ended careers.
Do you remember when they were trying to make a Davis versus Mares fight?
Abner Mares. This was well before Gervonta Davis faced Leo Santa Cruz. Do you remember they were trying to make that fight between Abner and Gervonta? And do you remember that in the
interim leading up to the fight, Abner got injured.
He injured his retina. And since having injured his retina, he hasn't come back. He hasn't fought. He hasn't fought Gervonta. He hasn't fought anyone at all. Errol Spence Jr. suffered a retinal injury.
Now, maybe his isn't as bad as Abner's.
Now, maybe Errol's injury isn't as bad as Abner's was. Isn't as severe. Not yet, anyway. But how many punches to that eye do you think it's going to take before it is as bad as Abner's? Before it is as severe as Abner's injury? Errol, he's been medically cleared to fight as of November 1st. And he's got the green light to go ahead with this fight. From the doctors, from the WBA.
You think Ugas isn't going to target that eye?
What do you think? You think they wrote it into the contract that Yordenis Ugas can't target Errol Spence Jr.'s injured eye? You think that's written somewhere in the fine print?
Because unless it is, Errol's retina might become detached again.
He will have over a year's worth of ring rust to shake off, coming off what could be a career-ending injury. And the feeling, at least among some of Errol Spence Jr.'s fans, is that this is permissible and this is forgivable because Errol needs a tune-up fight ahead of what could be a Crawford fight when, even if Errol beats Yordenis Ugas and makes it through that fight in good fashion, that doesn't necessarily mean that he won't be banged up for it, and that doesn't necessarily mean that he won't have responsibilities as a champion that might come before a Terence Crawford fight. I mean, there's the detached retina, the inactivity, and Ugas to think about, but there are also mandatories. They got Stanionis to step aside in order to allow this fight to happen. Stanionis may end up fighting Radzov Butayev.
If Spence beats Ugas, he might have to fight the winner of that fight.
And that's just the WBA. By way of the WBC, Virgil Ortiz is coming closer and closer to becoming a mandatory challenger by way of the WBC. You think about the IBF, Jaron Boots Ennis is in a pole position to become Errol Spence Jr.'s mandatory challenger. This fight with Ugas, it's not exactly right around the corner. We're talking about several months from now. March? April?
Oh, you guys thought Terence was the only guy Errol has to worry about.
I'm afraid not. Listen.
Look.
As far as I'm concerned, Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr. actually happening is a long shot. Anybody who's followed this channel long enough will know I've been saying it for the last 3, going on 4 years, if not the last 4 years. I'm not convinced that the fight will happen, much less now that you got all these mandatories, all these young guns piling up, and you still have Terence Crawford hot on your trail. That's not even counting what's not so obvious, what's not immediately visible on the surface, though upon further analysis becomes clear that
this is eerily similar to the Wilder versus Joshua situation.
Wilder's fans will never admit it, but Deontay Wilder, like Errol Spence Jr., continuously put the fight off, put off the Anthony Joshua fight in pursuit of alternatives. And his last alternative, Tyson Fury, that spelt the end for Deontay Wilder, who is now courting retirement. He sought Tyson Fury out as an alternative to a Joshua fight, the way that Errol has sought out Yordenis Ugas as an alternative.
It's an alternative to a Crawford fight.
Listen, if you want to know what I think, what I really think, and you're here, so I'll assume that you do, I don't think Errol Spence Jr. is the same fighter that he was in 2017 when he fought Kell Brook. I don't think that Errol Spence Jr. is the same fighter that he was before the car accident, though the fighter that he was before the car accident was still a guy I picked Terence Crawford to beat.
Even more after the car accident.
Errol Spence Jr., much like Deontay Wilder, thinks he has the luxury of time, but from where I'm sitting, he looks like a guy who's on borrowed time. And finally, in featherweight news, WBA confirms Leo Santa Cruz will remain at featherweight, commits to facing Wood versus Conlan winner. BoxingScene.com has confirmed that the 4-division and reigning WBA super champion at featherweight has complied with a mandate to inform the sanctioning body of his plans at the weight. A previous ruling called for Santa Cruz to inform by December 13th of whether or not he planned to remain at featherweight and properly defend his belt, or if he were to remain at junior lightweight, in which case he would have been forced to vacate. Leo Santa Cruz honored our request to clarify his current position, Gilberto Jesus Mendoza, longtime WBA president, told BoxingScene.com, while ringside for a Showtime pay-per-view event in Amalie Arena, Tampa. We can confirm that Leo will enter a voluntary title defense and has expressed his interest and commitment to facing the winner of Conlan versus Wood. Santa Cruz has not fought at featherweight since a 12-round win over Ricardo Rivera in February of 2019. 2 fights have since followed, both at junior lightweight, where he won a WBA title in a decision victory over Miguel Flores before losing that belt in a 6th-round knockout at the heavy hands of Gervonta Davis. Santa Cruz serves as the evening's chief support for what is Thurman versus Barrios, as he will face Phoenix's Keenan Carabajal. The terms of the bout were not revealed, though Carabajal, who has won his last 18 fights, is a career featherweight, but not currently ranked in the WBA's top 15. In the event that Santa Cruz fails to honor any part of his commitment to the WBA order, the title will be declared vacant, and the winner of Wood versus Conlan will be recognized as the sanctioning body's lone titleist. The much-needed shift in business practices is part of the WBA's aggressive title reduction policy rolled out earlier this summer.
So they're letting him fight a guy that ain't even ranked by them.
Leo Santa Cruz continues to be given too much leeway by the WBA. Ideally, he should have been stripped a long time ago. Ideally, he should have been stripped when he won another version of their title upstairs at 130 pounds. That should have rescinded his status as a champion at 126 pounds, but WBA is going to WBA. And we might be hearing this news now, that he's committed to doing what he's got to do to stay a champion at 126 pounds.
I think he's just biding his time.
I think he'll hold on to that title a little while longer, but I don't see him defending it against the winner of Conlan versus Wood. You know what I see? I see Chris Colbert fighting reigning WBA super featherweight champion Roger Gutierrez, potentially beating Roger, winning that title, and then I see Leo Santa Cruz moving up to super featherweight, back up to super featherweight, and fighting Chris, not the winner of Conlan versus Wood.
Mick Conlan's with Top Rank.
And Lee Wood's with Matchroom. Leo Santa Cruz, Leo's with the PBC.
Do you honestly see Leo Santa Cruz fighting the winner of this fight? Because I don't.
We already know that Chris Colbert, in the very near future, he's supposed to be challenging Venezuela's Roger Gutierrez for the WBA super featherweight title. And I think Chris Colbert stands a good chance of winning that fight. I do. Moreover, when he wins that fight, if he does, I could see Leo Santa Cruz moving up in weight to fight him before I see him crossing the street to fight on a Matchroom show or a Top Rank show.
The only guys that cross over from the PBC are guys that ain't got a choice.
Like Sean Porter, who had already fought most of his own stablemates on the PBC side of things, like Marcus Brown this past weekend, who didn't have any world titles to fight for at light heavyweight.
The only guys that cross over from the PBC are guys that ain't got a choice.
Leo Santa Cruz does. He can face the winner of Colbert versus Gutierrez.
This fight he's about to have on the Thurman versus Barrios card is a tune-up fight.
Even more peculiar is that it's against a guy that isn't even ranked by the WBA. I mean, I'd like to be wrong about this, but I don't think I will be. I don't think I am. I think Leo Santa Cruz will move up before he fights the winner of Conlan versus Wood. And that's what I'm expecting.
No stranger to super featherweight. He's been there before.
He held the title there for all of 10 seconds till Gervonta Davis moved back down and knocked him out. That's where I think he's going to end up.